Have you ever been reading a book and then at some point you realize your eyes have been scanning the page, but you haven't really been absorbing the meaning? You're like, oh crap, I was wandering for a second there, I was supposed to be reading. What's that moment like? It's usually a bit of an epiphany, right? You just notice that, oh, I was wandering. And just before you noticed that you were wandering, would you say that at that point you knew you were wandering? On one hand, maybe yes, because if I'd asked you right then, hey, are you wandering? You could have said, oh yeah, I am. On the other hand, you were a little surprised, right? So you didn't really know exactly. And so they do this, they've done studies where they put students in a lab and they give them a boring text to read on the screen, and they give the students a buzzer, and the students are supposed to press the buzzer when they realize they've been zoning out. And sometimes it can take a little while before students press the button, even when they're zoning out. And you can detect this by putting a prompt on the screen, hey, are you zoning out? And people are like, oh yeah, I was supposed to press the buzzer. So it's almost like we have two different kinds of knowing. One is very passive, like, oh yeah, if I could tell you I'm wandering if you asked me. And the other one's kind of active, like, right now, I know this is where my mind is. So what if you wanted to fix this problem of mindless reading? How would you do that? What skill would you need to learn? Well, first, it would really help to kind of always know where your mind is. You can detect, hey, really quickly, hey, I'm zoning out right now, and you can kind of come back to the text. And if you develop this skill, you would clearly have your reading comprehension improve, but is that all? Well, soon I think we'll find out that it's not the only skill you'd get. There's quite a bit more. What is the skill, though? So we can take a hint from a study on mindless reading that recently came out. The author here says, these findings suggest that people can fundamentally lack an awareness of the contents of their consciousness. And so he's talking about the time during which you're wandering, but you haven't figured it out yet. You haven't pressed the buzzer yet. So let's look at that quote again briefly. Lack an awareness of the contents of their consciousness. Now, you can't really be aware of anything other than the contents of your consciousness. Those are the only things you can really be aware of. So what he's really saying is that sometimes we're just less aware. And this can be a little hard to swallow because it can really feel like we're almost always aware. In fact, if you check right now, are you aware? Are you? Right now you'll find that you are. I mean, because I just asked you. And that's true even if you weren't just a few seconds ago. And how do you even know if you were a few seconds ago? Maybe, yeah, I meant to be thinking about my ex-girlfriend for a few seconds. Or maybe not. So with a bit of practice, you actually may notice during the day more fluctuations in your own awareness. You may detect zone-outs more frequently, like maybe while you're in line at the grocery store, or maybe when you're stopped at a red light in your car, or maybe even like during this talk. And with even more practice, you might learn to zone out a little less. And even without practice, it turns out that we notice this on our own periodically, and this is how we detect mindless reading. If you didn't ping yourself occasionally while mindless reading, you might just go off on your reverie for quite some time. And notice I just use the word ping. I like that concept. It's sort of like a ping. Are you aware right now? So I'll use that concept again throughout the talk, and I may even ping you by doing this. Ping, and that's just a question of, are you aware right now? And so, we do this every now and then, but we can actually increase the frequency of the pings. We can shorten the interval between these so we can notice more frequently what's going on in our experience. And they don't have to be intrusive. I mean, sometimes when you're reading and you ping, it's sort of like, it's a big interruption. It's like, you interrupt even your daydream. And sometimes daydreams are good, or maybe sometimes your mind wandering is useful or productive. And so we'll learn that pinging doesn't have to be kind of heavyweight. It can be more subtle. So what I want to get across in this talk is that pinging oneself more frequently is a skill. It's a very useful skill. And it's not very obvious right now what all the different benefits are, so we're going to talk about a variety of those. And it's also not very clear, I think, on how you would train it. I mean, if it were, we would probably all be perfect at this right now, perfectly aware all the time, never zoning out. But it's probably not true.